What happens when a black CEO goes undercover as a customer and is denied service by his own employees, simply because of the color of his skin? The afternoon sky turned a dull shade of gray, hinting at an early season storm, but it did nothing to slow the steps of the middle-aged man calmly stepping down from an old pickup truck. His low-slung cap, plastic-framed sunglasses, and weathered denim jacket couldn't fully disguise the bearing of someone who had once stood behind the success of one of the fastest-growing motorcycle dealership chains in America. His name was Dominic Weller, but today, under the alias Liam Frost, he was just an ordinary customer. Few knew he was the founder of Weller Motors, built from nothing and over 10 years grown into an empire spanning 6 states. But as the gap widened between glossy internal reports and the cold, hard truths pouring in from customers, he knew he could no longer sit in an office and guess. He needed to see with his own eyes, to hear with his own ears. And that journey began at the place that once filled him with pride, Branch 6 in Crestview. The moment he stepped into the parking lot, Dominic felt something was off. Not from the rows of gleaming high-end motorcycles neatly aligned under the fading afternoon light, but from an intangible shift in the air, cold, indifferent, lacking life. On the glass steps outside the showroom, a young man in his 20s was locked in a tense exchange with a security guard. "I had an appointment," he said, voice tightening with frustration. "I showed up on time, so how is the bike already sold?" The guard, a burly man with tattooed forearms, offered only a half smile. "We prioritize regulars. You weren't on the list." The young man froze, looked as if to say more, then turned and walked away, his face drained of color. Dominic paused, eyes tracking the young man as he left the lot, a heaviness settling in his chest. Was this how they now treated strangers? Once upon a time, every customer had been seen as part of a community he had painstakingly built. But now, it seemed a quiet order ruled here, selective, stratified, and exclusionary. Dominic stepped into the main lobby. The glass doors closed behind him, sealing out the outside noise and leaving behind a hushed, sterile space. The rhythmic tapping of keyboards, the clack of heels on polished tile, and the looping voiceover from the LCD wall screen formed a mechanical pulse, detached, impersonal, like a machine running on autopilot. A female staff member approached, her curly hair neatly tied back, her name tag reading Rachel Sloan, Senior Sales Advisor. She flashed a polished, professional smile. Polite, pleasant, but never truly warm. "Good afternoon. How can I assist you today?" Dominic maintained his calm, lowering his voice. "I'm looking for a beginner-friendly bike. Nothing too powerful, just something reliable and steady." Rachel nodded, eyes flicking over his modest clothing as if assessing his wallet. "We've got a few good models for that," she said, swiftly leading him to a row of mid-tier bikes. As she launched into her pitch about the Triumph Street Triple, now fitted with some aftermarket parts that subtly inflated its price, Dominic stayed mostly silent. He watched how the other staff interacted, how glances darted away when customers entered. Something had shifted here, deeply and strangely. When Rachel began explaining additional charges for insurance and accessories, Dominic gently cut in. "Emergency service fee? I've never heard of that." Rachel shrugged. "It's a new policy since last month. Applies to walk-ins who didn't book through the system." A convenient excuse, conjured far too quickly. Dominic smiled faintly to himself. In the system he had designed, there was no such thing as a hidden emergency fee. He knew the game had begun. And he was standing at the center of something rotting from within, though not enough yet to pass judgment. He needed to dig deeper, listen more closely. When Rachel asked him to wait while she checked the inventory, Dominic moved toward the customer seating area, quietly observing. A middle-aged man was signing paperwork while a staff member pointed to fine print with surgical precision. A group of teenagers loitered outside the window, gawking at the Ducati Panigale inside, their eyes filled with longing. In the far corner, 2 guests stood speaking in hushed tones, occasionally glancing toward the service desk. Dominic couldn't hear them clearly, but instinct kicked in, like he'd just stepped into a maze, where every turn hid a secret buried long ago. He took a sip of complimentary water, eyes never leaving the subtle choreography of the showroom floor. His quiet investigation had officially begun. And if what he suspected turned out to be true, then this place, once a name synonymous with trust and pride, was now being run by people who had no understanding of the one thing he had sacrificed half a lifetime to build: integrity. Dominic sat silently in the customer lounge, his eyes tracking every small movement within the showroom. The overhead lights cast shifting reflections across the polished tile floors, bouncing off the gleaming motorcycles that sat motionless like soldiers awaiting orders. Only the clacking of keyboards, the swish of automatic doors, and the steady hum of sales pitches broke the sterile calm. After a while, Rachel returned with a stack of printed brochures in hand, her smile as composed as ever. "Congratulations," she said gently. "The Triumph Street Triple you were looking at is the last one in stock. But if you make your decision today, I can throw in some upgrade accessories just for you." Dominic tilted his head as if weighing the offer, intentionally showing a bit of hesitation. "I'd still like to think it over a bit more, if that's all right," he said. Rachel nodded quickly, unfazed. "Of course, but I should mention, this model doesn't stick around long. Just last week, someone missed it by 10 minutes. Dominic nodded slowly and began flipping through the sample contract she had handed him. To the untrained eye, the pricing breakdown and attached agreement seemed completely standard. But to Dominic, who had reviewed thousands of sales files throughout his career, the red flags lit up like runway lights. A line for temporary inventory storage fee, $389, electronic warranty activation, $210, and a vague mandatory administrative processing fee were not found in any of the approved templates he had ever signed off on. More importantly, Rachel hadn't explained a single one of them. She had simply summarized, "These are all standard manufacturer charges." He furrowed his brow slightly and asked, "Is there any way to reduce some of these fees? I'm financing this through a bank, and every dollar matters." Rachel leaned in subtly, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret. "If you're able to pay today, I can waive the storage fee and switch the warranty to a temporary plan. But please don't mention this to anyone. It's part of an internal policy not yet public." Dominic offered a polite smile and thanked her, but inside, his thoughts churned. The vague language, the illusion of a private deal. These were the very tactics he had once warned his entire sales force never to use. And yet here it was, happening in one of the branches touted as the standard bearer. He stood and strolled toward the displayed bike. At that moment, Rachel pulled out her phone, lightly scrolled through the screen, and whispered into a call, "Seal it at 17.4. Sweet customer. Prep the B form." Dominic caught the smirk on her face as she hung up. That phrase, B form, raised immediate alarm bells. In Weller Motors' official sales policy, only one contract template existed. There was no version B or C. So what was this B? A backdoor edit for under-the-table transactions? A workaround to evade internal audits? As he pondered, Dominic suddenly noticed a seemingly minor detail, something others might overlook. On the far corner of the payment counter, a brown folder sat partially concealed beneath a clipboard, and on its edge, he spotted the logo of an independent transport company he had personally blacklisted 2 years ago due to a scandal involving counterfeit parts. No paperwork bearing that name should exist within this dealership's systems. So why was it here? Before he could move closer to examine it, 2 new customers entered the showroom. Rachel quickly fixed her hair and stepped out to greet them, leaving Dominic alone with a growing list of questions. He sat back down casually, but his gaze never left the counter. A technician in a charcoal uniform emerged quietly from the back warehouse, retrieved a folder, and disappeared without a word. The door clicked shut behind him, a soft sound that landed like the bolt of a locked vault. Dominic's mind spun with unanswered questions. Why so many coincidental red flags? Hidden fees, B contracts, off-the-books logistics, and now a blacklisted company resurfacing? The truth was likely tucked away behind the scenes, in a place regular customers were never allowed. And if he wanted to pull back the curtain, he would need a reason to get closer. Dominic approached the front desk and offered the receptionist a gentle smile. "I heard there are some restored models on display in the service area. Would it be possible for me to take a look?" The receptionist hesitated, then glanced up toward the ceiling camera. "I'll need to ask the manager first. Please give me a moment." Just then, 2 guests standing nearby began a hushed conversation that froze Dominic in place. One of them muttered softly, just loud enough for him to hear, "Tonight at 9, behind the warehouse, same as usual. Bring all the cash. Dennis won't wait." Dominic turned his head slowly, as if casually surveying the space. But inside, he knew. Tonight, the truth would begin to reveal itself. 9 p.m., the back lot behind the showroom was cloaked in a dense California night. The pale yellow glow of the street lamps did little to chase away the biting chill that crept through every seam of the metal doors. Dominic parked his truck a short distance from the warehouse exit, just out of camera range but close enough to observe. His cap was pulled low, shadowing half his face. For the first time in years, he truly felt like a spy, and the truth was starting to show its face. Around 9:10, a silver-gray pickup truck pulled in, its front plate conspicuously missing. A tall man in a leather jacket stepped out carrying a black case. From the warehouse door, a side entrance cracked open. Rachel appeared, stripped of her usual polished demeanor, her eyes sharp, her steps rushed. She exchanged a few quick words with the man, and after a nod, he popped open the case. Dominic narrowed his eyes. Inside were not stacks of money, but parts. A reprogrammed ECU module, exhaust pipes with tampered warranty labels, and a few electronic components he recognized instantly, reported stolen from a Denver dealership last year. Dominic gripped the steering wheel. He had suspected this went beyond hidden fees or padded sales quotas, but now he was facing something far darker, an underground parts ring operating right out of Weller Motors' own facility. Suddenly, Rachel turned her head toward the parking lot. Dominic instinctively ducked. He couldn't be seen. Quietly, he pressed record on the device in his jacket. Rachel's voice rang out clearly. "This one's from the Arizona client lot. No one checks those, as long as Dennis wipes the tracking codes." Dennis, finally named. A senior technician once suspended for fabricating vehicle histories to skim warranty funds. Dominic hadn't expected him to still be active, let alone an integral player in a system Rachel herself appeared to be running. Before Dominic could act, a fist knocked hard on his driver's side window. He jolted, his hand moving instinctively to his waistband, but it was only a night guard on patrol. "Sorry, sir, this area's under maintenance, no overnight parking." Dominic smiled sheepishly. "Got turned around. Thanks." He slowly drove off, but his thoughts were anything but calm. The next morning, Dominic returned to the showroom wearing the same casual charm. Rachel greeted him with her practiced smile. "Welcome back, loyal customer. Made your decision?" Dominic nodded. "I think I'll take the bike today." Her face lit up. "Fantastic, I'll draw up the contract." As she walked away, Dominic casually brushed past the reception desk, his hand slipping under the console to check the hidden recording device he had placed earlier that morning. Every word, every action from here on out would be captured. Inside the office, Dominic sat across from Rachel. On the desk lay a contract, and just as he predicted, it didn't match the official template. "I have a question about this one," he said, pointing to a line labeled Independent Ownership Verification Fee, $478. Rachel responded smoothly, as if reading from a script. "That's just a safeguard fee for interstate transfers. Totally standard." Dominic leaned in, his eyes sharp as blades. "I used to work in Nevada's vehicle registry. Never heard of this fee." Rachel paused for half a second, then smirked. "You don't have to buy. There's a wait list anyway." And that was the moment Dominic saw it clearly. She wasn't afraid of losing a sale because every transaction wasn't just about selling a bike. It was a cog in a much bigger scheme. Commissions from swapped parts, cutbacks from phantom fees, and slicing warranty programs in half to convert leftovers into black market profits. As he exited the office, Dominic ran into the man he needed most, Dennis, tall, broad-shouldered, with cold eyes. "Did you check the ECU on the Triumph this morning?" Dominic asked casually, playing the part of a meticulous customer. Dennis shrugged. "If Rachel says it's good, it's good." Dominic gave a knowing nod. Now it was clear. They were a closed-loop operation. Stepping out into the sun, Dominic pulled out his phone and typed a coded message. "Initiate Protocol Q1. Begin full audit documentation. Maintain secrecy. Dispatch Special Investigation Team to Facility 27 within 48 hours. I will personally oversee." He slipped the phone back into his pocket and stood tall, gazing over the showroom as if seeing it for the first time. A polished shell hiding a machine of manipulation powered by the very people he once trusted. Dominic's face showed no rage, only cold resolve and purpose. This time he hadn't come to check on a showroom. He had come to tear every mask off. And when the truth finally came to light, There would be no one left who could say, "I didn't know." 2 days after the fateful encounter with Rachel and Dennis, Dominic had stepped out of his role as a customer and moved into the silent phase of evidence gathering. Under the guise of a temporary inspection engineer assigned by the regional technical division, he had crafted the perfect excuse to move freely through internal departments without raising suspicion. For years, he had believed that corporate culture was built on integrity and transparency, but now he found himself using covert strategies to save it from being corrupted from within. That morning, Dominic sat quietly in the staff break room, sipping coffee while listening to a conversation between two young technicians. One of them, named Leo, spoke in a low voice. "Don't you think it's strange? Lately, a lot of warranty bikes are being sent back to the manufacturer even for minor issues." The other shrugged. "Orders from Rachel. Any bike that seems difficult to service gets sent back. Cut our losses. She doesn't like the complaining types. You know, those people are usually different." Dominic raised his head. Different? What did that mean? Race? Appearance? Income? It was in that moment that he realized Rachel was not just manipulating revenue, but also selecting customers based on discriminatory standards. A showroom owned by a major corporation located in the heart of Los Angeles was operating like an exclusive club, where only the right kind of customers received premium service. Later that afternoon, Dominic intentionally left behind a modified contract printout on the shared office printer. Rachel found it, and a few hours later, he was summoned to a private meeting. In the small room under the soft yellow lights, Rachel sat behind her desk, eyes sharp as blades, scanning his every move. "I hear you're doing some internal technical auditing," she said with a polite smile. "An interesting title." Dominic replied coolly, "Just supporting some processes at the regional team's request. We both know the showroom has had some unusual warranty trends lately." Rachel crossed her arms and tilted her head. "Strange, because everything seems to be running smoothly to me. Sales are up, customers are returning." Dominic smiled. "Maybe because some customers aren't allowed to return anymore." The air in the room grew noticeably colder. She stood, circling behind him, her tone dropping. "I don't know what you're looking for, but a piece of honest advice. Don't dig into things beyond your scope." Dominic turned his head and met her gaze. "And mine to you. Don't underestimate someone just because he stays silent." As he left the room, Dominic caught sight of something familiar on the side table. A red USB drive he had once seen Dennis use to flash bike operating systems. Next to it was a stack of printed code snippets, under a cover page disguised as weekly performance review. That night, Dominic made a video call to Amber, head of internal investigations. On screen, she listened intently to every detail: the customer discrimination, hidden fees, Rachel, Dennis, and the potential links to other dealerships. In the end, Amber said only one thing: "We'll activate Tier 3 protocol surveillance. For the next 72 hours, every action by management will be recorded. Your job is to hold your position." Before the call ended, Dominic asked quietly, "What if they suspect me?" Amber smiled. "Then the CEO reveal will come a little sooner than planned. But let them walk into the trap themselves. The deeper they sink, the clearer the evidence becomes." And in that moment, Dominic remembered something he had forgotten. In the game of power and manipulation, it is always those who think they are in control who lose it the fastest. Within just 48 hours of the internal surveillance system being activated, the full picture began to take shape. Dominic, still posing as a temporary technician, received the first audio recording from Amber, a conversation between Rachel and Dennis captured inside the storage room. In the recording, Rachel coldly instructed Dennis not to admit any customer who doesn't look like a real buyer, and ordered the technical team to prioritize servicing for white VIP clients, regulars from Brentwood, Beverly Hills, or those with pre-approved financial histories. Dennis followed up with lines laced in prejudice: "And those who ask too many questions, dress plain. Just put them on delayed maintenance. Parts back order if needed. The longer the better." This was no longer suspicion. It was irrefutable truth. Racial discrimination and class bias had become embedded into daily operations. Dominic knew there was no turning back now. That evening, he walked into the showroom one final time as a customer. Dressed simply as before, He headed toward a premium electric motorbike, the very kind systematically kept from unqualified buyers. It didn't take long for Rachel to spot him, but this time, her look was not just indifferent, it was deeply suspicious. "You came back sooner than I thought," she said, eyes narrowing like a predator recognizing familiar prey. Dominic smiled. "I've been reconsidering. This Rebel SX seems more worthwhile than I expected." Rachel said nothing. Instead, she signaled Dennis. The two exchanged a few brief words, then Dennis discreetly pulled out his phone and sent a message. Dominic noticed. 5 minutes later, he heard the office door click open. 2 men entered. No uniforms, no name badges. One was tall, bearded, eyes alert. The other stood silently with folded arms, blocking the glass exit. Dominic understood immediately. They had called in private security. Rachel stepped forward, her smile now predatory. "Unfortunately, I've just been informed that your financial profile does not align with our qualified buyer criteria. I'll have to ask you to leave the showroom." At that moment, Dominic pulled a small object from his coat pocket. A folded ID badge, clearly marked with the words, "Dominic Wexler, Chief Executive Officer, Verve Mobility Group." The room froze. "Seems like you're the one who's not qualified, Rachel," Dominic said calmly. "I've observed long enough to see that this place has been twisted into a machine that filters customers by bias, not by financial readiness, and I have all the evidence I need." Dennis took a step back. Rachel stood frozen, pale as a sheet. She tried to swallow her shock, then growled, "You faked your identity? You planted recording devices? This is a setup?" Dominic nodded slowly. "Not a setup. A test. An ethics test. One that you, unfortunately, failed completely." The staff around the showroom began to murmur. A few technicians stepped out from the back, watching silently. The private security team exchanged confused looks, then quietly withdrew from the central area. Rachel, now with no allies left, lunged for her desk and opened her laptop. Dominic knew exactly what she was trying to do: wipe the records. Immediately, he pulled out his phone and said, "Amber, begin data sync. Lock down all servers at the Westwood showroom now." From the other end, Amber's voice was firm. "Done. She no longer has access." Rachel collapsed into her chair. No data, no power, no one left to cover for her. And as Dominic turned to the gathered employees watching in silence, he spoke only one sentence. "Tomorrow, we begin again. But first, the truth must be made public." Less than 12 hours after the explosive expose at the Westwood showroom, Dominic Wexler convened an emergency meeting with the entire senior executive board of Verve Mobility Group. The meeting took place in the main conference room at headquarters in Chicago, a vast glass space with an unobstructed view of Lake Michigan, a room that had witnessed some of the company's most historic decisions. The atmosphere was heavy, weighted like lead. On the table were printed transcripts of the recording between Rachel and Dennis, screenshots of internal emails secured by Amber, and most importantly, surveillance footage capturing blatant customer discrimination at the showroom. There was no denying it. Dominic rose from his seat, his gaze cold but composed. "We are not just talking about an individual violation. We're looking at a system that allowed it, even encouraged it. Someone approved this internal customer filtering model. Someone signed off on the budget that paid for a private security team operating outside protocol." A few eyes began shifting away. In the corner sat Gordon Frey, the gray-haired executive vice president of the Western Division, who shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Dominic looked straight at him. "Gordon, your division has overseen Westwood for the past 3 years. Is there anything you'd like to share?" Gordon responded coolly. "We've always done our best to keep that showroom competitive, Dominic. It's a brutal market. We issued directives to prioritize high-potential clients. That's not discrimination." "High potential?" Dominic pressed. "Please define that for me. Well-dressed? White? Connected to someone in the system?" Gordon shot back. "I'm not responsible for monitoring every word my staff says, and I certainly can't be blamed if a few individuals misinterpret directives." Dominic placed a file folder on the table. "This is the staffing schedule and customer interaction log from Westwood over the last 6 months. The data shows that white customers were greeted within an average of 4 minutes after entering. Meanwhile, customers of Asian or African descent waited an average of 19 minutes. and were often denied test drives. The room fell silent. A woman's voice broke through. I approved the internal training program for the Western Division, and I can say with certainty there's no part of it that permits evaluating customers by race. Dominic turned to her. Thank you, Elaine. But it's precisely because our training never explicitly addressed diversity, never proactively blocked discrimination, that silence became a loophole. He paused, then continued. I don't want a half-hearted cleanup. I want a full purge. Starting today, every Verve showroom will undergo a complete audit of its customer interaction protocols. We will retrain every employee and dismantle any internal mechanism that can be exploited for prejudice. Several board members nodded in agreement. We'll also be implementing AI-powered behavioral analytics in every showroom. If a staff member greets someone within 3 minutes because they spotted a Rolex but ignores another customer in plain clothes, the system will catch it. Another regional director spoke up. You do that, you'll get pushback from conservative markets. They'll say we're being overly sensitive about race. Dominic looked directly at him. If the price of fairness is losing a few partners, I'm willing to pay it. What I won't pay is the cost of dishonoring a brand I spent 20 years building. The meeting ended in heavy silence, but no one dared to oppose him. Dominic had done what few CEOs ever would. Publicly called out his own leadership system and began again from the hardest, most painful place of all, the truth. 1 week after the high-level meeting at Verve Mobility Group's headquarters, the atmosphere across the luxury vehicle industry in America had completely shifted. What began as a clip showing a black man being turned away in front of a motorcycle he could have paid for in full had now become front-page news, from the New York Times to The Guardian. They didn't just report on the discrimination at the Westwood showroom, they named Dominic Wexler, the quiet CEO who chose to expose his own system rather than cover it up. In an exclusive interview with 60 Minutes, Dominic said just one sentence that made social media explode. Not everyone in a suit is a qualified buyer, and not everyone in a t-shirt is poor. A customer is a human being, not a walking credit score. But amid the wave of headlines and supportive tweets, Dominic held on to something that few people knew. He was still waiting on a phone call. From Maria, the receptionist who had once been cut off mid-sentence by Rachel, who quietly left behind a recording, and who was the first to show Dominic that something was deeply wrong with the system, had resigned the very next day after the video was released. Dominic had sent her a private message of gratitude, offering her a role as advisor for the new internal training program. But Maria hadn't replied. Until one Monday morning. When Dominic stepped into the first training session at the newly launched Atlanta branch, a model showroom for the future of Verve, he suddenly stopped. The person standing at the front of the room, preparing a slide deck titled "Serving People by Value, Not by Appearance," was none other than Maria. She wore a crisp white shirt, her hair neatly pinned up, her gaze still gentle as ever, but now with a newfound confidence and clarity. When I left Westwood, I thought I didn't belong in this world, Maria said to the class of new hires. But then I realized I just didn't belong to the old world. And this new one, we're going to build it together. The room broke into applause. Dominic said nothing. He simply took a seat in the back, silent, watching, like any other student. In the months that followed, Verve Motors formally launched a series of unprecedented reform policies in the industry. An AI-driven system to monitor employee behavior and customer feedback in real time. A complete ban on categorizing high-potential clients based on appearance. Establishment of a customer equality council with full access to showroom data and independent investigative authority. A commitment to hiring management-level staff from historically underserved communities. Showrooms that once faced boycotts were now seeing the highest growth in revenue. For the first time, customers felt truly seen, not for who they were on paper, but for who they were as people. As for Dominic, he didn't hold press conferences or issue grand statements. He simply wrote one line on the whiteboard in his new office. A good company doesn't begin with a marketing campaign. It begins with how we greet a stranger. At Westwood, where everything began, it is now the first showroom where staff are randomly selected to ensure natural diversity. Rachel and Dennis were terminated, but Dominic refused to name them publicly. We don't punish individuals, we fix systems. As for Maria, she's no longer at the front desk. She is now Verve's head of customer culture, the first person to ever hold the role. A young woman of color who once stood silently behind the counter is now invited to speak at the National Auto Industry Conference with a keynote titled, "Selling Vehicles with Heart, Not Just Customer Profiles." That evening, after a long day's work, Dominic stepped onto the balcony of Verve's headquarters. The sunset stretched across the glass rooftops, casting a warm glow that felt like affirmation. He had done the right thing. He pulled out his phone and opened the first photo he ever took of his very first showroom, a dusty, worn-down old workshop from 20 years ago, and he smiled. The world doesn't change because of perfect people. It changes because of those who refuse to stay silent. In the world of business, the problem doesn't lie in a few misguided individuals, but in how an entire system is designed to exclude those who don't look like the ideal customer. Dominic Wexler chose not to remain silent. He used his own power to do what was right, not for himself, but for those without a voice. This isn't just a story about a rejected motorcycle. It's about a mindset being overturned and a culture being reborn. If you believe that systemic change begins with one person brave enough to face the truth, then like this video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other inspiring stories, and don't forget to leave a comment with the phrase "Choose Justice" to help spread this powerful message.